Hi there, I'm Lance and I'm a gamer.
I'm Sam and I'm a non-gamer.
And we are Love to Hate, where we try to bridge the gap between gamers and non-gamers.
And today we're taking a look at Fabled, the Spirit Land by Crowd Games.
Fabled the Spirit Land is a game in which you and the other players are going to be working to be the Brotherhood of Sages who best earns the most Books of Sun. And what you'll be doing in this game is trying to turn your one book of prairies into books of mountains, into books of forests, which turn into books of sun. So this is going to be a conversion game, but it's also a path in which or a game in which you are following along different paths, trying to advance to get to certain places where you can take these actions to combo into other actions to get those books of sun. Let me show you how it works down below, and then we'll come back and share our thoughts on it as a gamer and non-gamer. All right, I have Fabled the Spirit Lands on the table. Let me show you guys about this path track progression game in which you are going to be trying to convert your books of prairie into books of mountain, into books of forest, and into books of sun, because the winner is going to be whoever has the most books of sun in this game. Now, what you have in the game, obviously, I just showed you, you've got some tokens, you have a lot of cards, jumbo-sized cards, that are going to form a pathway here in the center of the board, or center of the table, and you have some tokens as well as some meeples that you'll be using to keep your track progression on these different pathways. Now, how this game is going to work, the theme of it is that you are trying to be the Brotherhood of Sages that are going to sort of, I guess, control the landscape of this new world, this new land, as the gods are creating it here in front of you. And so it's pretty mystical, pretty spiritual kind of game. And with this, the idea is that these cards over here make up the land, but it's also making a story, because at the beginning of the game, you will have a marker right here that will tell you that this is the epilogue, and it will keep track of the game. And these are different chapters as you progress through the game. So in the epilogue, which is also kind of part of setup, what's going to happen is that whoever is the first player will have this token, and they will select one of the cards that are out here in the market. Now, the market would not look like it's seen here. I'm doing this just to save space and get everything on frame, but you would have the books of prairie stacked above the books of mountain, stacked above the books of forest. And they go in that order in terms of cheapest to most expensive, but also most valuable or most beneficial, what's going to give you the best rewards, to what's going to give you the cheapest rewards. Let's put it that way. And anyhow, you will start the game with a number of books, and these are going to be your books of prairie. They're your least valuable. The books of sun, obviously, are the most valuable. Those are victory points. And so you'll have some books of prairie, books of mountain, books of forest, and you will use those tokens to be able to purchase a cart out here in the market. Prairie tokens used to purchase prairie, mountain tokens used to purchase mountain, and forest tokens used to purchase forest. And whatever you end up purchasing, let's say it ends up being this card right here, it's going to have a pathway as denoted by the dots and the numbers here. And along the pathway, there are going to be spots that are highlighted that are going to be special fabled places for you to visit as you move your meeple down the pathway. So if this is the card that I end up purchasing, I'm going to put one of my sages on the start space on that pathway, and I'll just set it right here in the middle, and then the card would refresh in the market, and then it would be the next player's turn. And let's say they take one of these mountain cards right here. Now, mountain cards are special because they have two separate pathways. You've got a pathway that's going to be connecting to the card behind it and the card in front of it, but then you have a dead end path that only the person who places this card in the line of cards gets to put one of their sages on it to be able to access the special place, the fabled place at the end of its pathway. Now, when you're adding cards to this pathway, you can add it anywhere in the line of cards, but you typically want to try and match up where your line is going to where you could connect it. So you probably would not want to connect these two cards right here, because this mountain pathway does not connect to the next card. card, this prairie card, because the line up here stops at the top of the card and it starts on the next card down here. And when that happens, if you have a sage that would move off of a card, they're just going to come back to you and they are not going to be able to continue on down the path on the next card. So you typically don't want to do that. You want to try and line cards up like you see here with this prairie card ending at the top and the next card, the mountain card, starting at the top. That's kind of the idea of what you want to try and do with this game. And again, the cards will make a continuous path, or maybe they don't make a continuous path, but you do place the cards out here in the line, and you can place them, like I said, anywhere in this line. Now, on a turn is very simple. What you will be doing is you'll take one action and then you'll declare movement for that turn. So you have 4 choices for your action. The first could be to simply take 2 books of prairie. Now, the books of prairie, as I mentioned already, these are the cheapest books, and you will be using these primarily to help you purchase other cards throughout the course of the game, and I'll come back to what that's like here in just a second. The next most valuable are going to be the books of mountain, then books of forest, books of sun. Now, another action that you could do on your turn is you could perform 1 or 2 conversions, and this is something you're going to be doing quite often throughout the course of the game, because you'll want to convert 2 books of prairie into 1 book of mountain. And you'll want to convert 2 books of mountain into 1 book of forest, and 2 books of forest into a book of sun. And again, remember, these are victory points. Whoever has the most of these is going to be the winner. So that's another action you could do, is to perform 1 or 2 of those converges I just talked about. A third action that you could do for your action on the turn is to simply move one of your sages 1 space forward on whatever card that they might be on. And then the last action that you could do on your turn is purchasing a new location and adding it to the line. Now, in order to do this, you are going to have to spend your books. You'll have to spend at least 1 book of mountain to get a mountain card, and 1 book of forest to get a forest card, and 1 book of prairie to get a prairie card. But in addition to that, you'll want to look at what's already in the line here. And let's say, for instance, I want to add another mountain card. Well, we already have a mountain card on the line. So in addition to the 1 book of mountain, I will need to put a card from the mountains into the line. I will also need 1 book of prairie to pay as the cost for there already being a book of mountain on the line. And if there had been 2 books of mountain somewhere in the line, then I would need to pay 2 books of prairie. So the price for adding these cards will go up as there are more cards in the line. So those are the 4 types of actions that you can do on your turn. And when you do add a card somewhere to the line, you are always adding sages to start at the beginning of that card. And remember, the Book of Mountain, there's going to be 2 lines, so you'll have 2 sages to be moving down the pathway there. Now, after you perform your choice of action out of those 4 options I just told you, then you're going to declare movement. And you'll look at the line and you'll declare either prairies, mountains, or forests, and whatever you end up declaring, all of your sages on that card are going to move 2 spaces, and any other player's sages will move 1. So in this case right here, as we see, I've got somebody on prairies, and I would probably declare prairies so I can move 2 spaces forward. Now again, if you get to one of these highlighted spaces, you're going to get to go to one of the fabled places. And in this case, I have a choice. I can either go here, or I can go here and perform the related action that is associated with that fabled place. Now, some places don't have a choice. You just simply get to go to them and do whatever is done there and then continue along your merry way. And these places are primarily going to give you more books, or they'll let you convert books into other books at a better rate than what you could do with that conversion action that I talked about earlier. Or maybe they let you add more sages to the pathway. Maybe they give you extra steps to move you further on down the line to get to a different, better location. There's lots of different options for you. There is a player aid to kind of help you learn about the different places and what they all do. But you'll just want to reference this card to understand. And again, most of the time it's helping you to convert your lower books into higher books to ultimately get to books of sun. That's the idea with those fabled places. And that's really what you're doing on your turn. If at the end of your turn there's a card that has no sages on them, then it will be removed out of the line and sent to the bottom of its corresponding deck. That's called Oblivion. So the card line doesn't just keep growing and growing and growing. You will be taking cards out of this line as there are no sages on it. Now, these tokens over here, they're going to represent when special things happen in the story or the course of the game. Anytime you get to one of these blue cards, you will be drawing event cards, and there are 3 different types of event decks that you can be playing with, and these events are going to help you get things throughout the course of the way. There are also ally cards, and the ally cards are going to make a factor whenever you get to these red tokens here. You will start the game with an ally if you play with the allies. You don't have to play with them, but these allies are going to give you bonuses and combos that you can work off of when special things happen in the game, such as this particular one. It says once per turn during your action phase, if you have a sage in each of the 3 location types, prairies, mountains, forests, then you get to distribute 2 steps among your sages, steps being moving steps forward down the path. And that's kind of an idea of how these allies are going to work. You will get extra allies along the way, but you can also unlock special abilities in addition to their ability they start the game with. And that's pretty much the gist of the game as you go throughout the course of however many rounds you're playing, and it changes depending upon the number of players. At the end of it all, you will try and have the most Books of Sun to be the winner, and that's all there is to this game. Now, I do also want to point out that there is a special book here, a scenario guide book that you can play different scenarios, which are going to incorporate different event cards, different allies, and special rules to kind of change up the game a little bit. Different ways you can figure out who the winner is with the epilogue. That's how you figure out who the winner is. But there's also, you flip this over, and this is the challenge guide, and this is how you can play the game in cooperative mode, or you can still play competitively but have the game be a player in itself that everyone is competing against. And it's very similar to what I just showed you with the scenario mode, that there's going to be different ways to set it up and play the game. And there are additional pieces and cards that represent the autonomous player who you are playing against, again, either cooperatively or competitively with the other players. But that's it. That's what you have here with Fabled, the Spirit Lands. Let's go back up top and share our thoughts on this one. And we're back, and now we're going to share our thoughts on Fabled, the Spirit Lands, from a gamer and non-gamer's perspective. So the first thing I want to talk about with this game is the look to the game. You know, it has a very unique look and artwork about it, one that I find to be a little unsettling. It's not one that I'm like extremely over the moon for.
Yeah.
It's one that takes some time to kind of like get comfortable and used to, and I think that the theme of the game fits just right in with that too, because it's a very spiritual, animistic almost maybe kind of theme to it, where you've got these gods and fairies and sages,
witches, and
and so there's just this that kind of theme to the game. And not that it's ever kind of like any kind of religious aspects to it whatsoever, but it's just a very spirity fantasy type experience with the game. So I think that's something that has to be said. What for you was that experience like?
I don't typically, gear towards fantasy type games. Themes aren't obviously something that either gets me to play or not play a game, but the whole fantasy and witches and fairies and all that stuff, I'm just like, not my thing, not my cup of tea.
Which I would probably fall into that line of thinking as well. I'm gonna try a game, and see how it goes for the gameplay element, and that's kind of where I guess both of us are kind of coming from as we approach this type of game. Now, learning about it and hearing the description of what it was like, I found to be kind of intriguing, because it's this story path kind of game, or I guess that's part more of the theme too, but you are making these paths as you play the game, and the paths can change up, and you're trying to move down these paths to get to these special locations, these fabled lands, which are going to help you get the resources or to change one resource into another. And that sounded intriguing to me, because the idea, the goal of the game is very simple.
Yeah.
have the most books of sun.
Yeah.
Well, how do I get the books of sun? Well, you need books of forest. How do I get those? You need books of mountain. How do I get those? You need books of prairie.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of a cube conversion type game. And similar to kind of the idea in the game Furnace a couple years back, year before last, I think. A game that I was, bonkers over. I really enjoyed that game. And it was the same idea. You're going to turn this into that to turn that into this. And that's a similar idea. It's not the same game at all, but it's a similar idea with that game. For you as a non-gamer, what was it like wrapping your head around the goal or idea of this game? What you're trying to accomplish?
I think I understood the conversion part fairly easily. I think I had a harder time with the story, the paths. They're smaller. There's a lot on them.
Okay.
Visually, it's for me, was just overstimulating. I didn't really understand what my goal was when picking them.
Okay.
And so I just kind of, both times I managed to play with one meeple the entire, and win.
Sam was able to win the game and not get a whole lot of her sages out.
Yeah.
She was able to kind of find ways to get the resources she needed, which I think shows me that you don't have to play the game in a certain way to win it. Like, there are multiple paths to victory in this game, which can be a pro.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, she definitely was kind of neglecting one whole aspect of the game and still did very well.
Yeah, so it's okay.
Yeah. Now, for me, I think the game was one that it has some oddities about it, but there was still some things that were intriguing to me that made me want to keep playing it and interested in it. And it is a scenario type game where you're going to be using different event decks, different allies, and there's even a bad guy in the game that you can play together cooperatively against.
Yeah.
And so there's that aspect of it. Or you can also include it as an additional player in the game, so I'm still competing against her and other players, but then there's also this one that the game's competing against all of us as well. So there's some versatility with this game too, which is pretty unique.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to pros and cons for Fabled: The Spirit Lands. For you as a non-gamer, what stood out to you in a positive light?
I mean, I think as complicated as it looks on the board, the general idea of getting the red books. I don't remember the name.
Books of Sun.
Books of Sun. I was going to say fire.
I mean, yeah, we were calling them yellow, blue, green, and red, so yeah.
That idea is simple enough for a non-gamer to play fairly easily. It's just finding out how you specifically are going to make that happen. And like Lance said, we both played very differently and still were able to convert our books to the Books of Sun. And so I think that says a lot about the game. It's not so concrete that I have to play this way, you have to do this, and I'm not good at that. Mm-hmm. I was able to avoid whole sections of the game and still do okay.
Yeah, for sure. And like Sam's saying, I think that means that the game has multiple pathways to victory. Your choices do matter in this particular game. You can go a route of, well, I'm going to get the best paths in front of me to get to these locations to have the best choices. Or I'm going to make it really about the allies that I get in this game and play to their strengths. Because that's really what Sam was doing. She was really playing to the strengths of your allies, which was getting the resources and conversions and converting and converting and converting. And I mean, you did well with that. So you'd have engines that you can put together in this game that can really work out well for you. I like the comboing aspect of this game. That's not something we've said so far, and it's probably the best thing about the game, in my opinion, is that I can combo one thing into another thing into another thing. Mm-hmm. Meaning, like, if I've got this ally that gives me this benefit when I take this action, well, I'm going to take that action to get this benefit. Now that I have this benefit, it helps me to do this thing over here. And so you make this chain of actions work out for you, and it just sort of feels like, well, it's engine building. It feels like my engine is efficient and it's running and it's making all these combos. And what started off as just this simple little, I'm going to get 2 books of prairie and that's my whole turn, nothing happens, has become this bigger, better thing that I really feel like, man, I've got something going here and it's working pretty good. So what maybe stands out in a not so great way with you for this one?
Well, like I said, I just feel like there's a little too much going on those cards. Just for a non-gamer, there was so much going on, and I really didn't understand why I would choose one over another necessarily. So I just kind of avoided it.
Well, but to that, I think we should probably say the iconography with this game. There is quite a bit of iconography. The player aids do help out a lot with that. I was having to look at the player aid quite a bit. So that's one thing. But then going to the cards, it's almost like there's too much artwork on the cards because the icons sort of bleed into the artwork and it's hard to distinguish what am I supposed to be looking at here on this, and you do have to kind of really look in.
You have to follow the tiny little dots and paths and everything. So I just felt like there's just a little too much going on.
And if you're not sitting close to the path cards, that's going to be a real problem. Like you're going to have to be asking people, what is that one again? What is that over there? That's going to be an issue.
Explain it all to me.
Yeah.
And then just the general theme, I think, just isn't.
It's a bit odd.
Yeah. It's just not up my alley, but I can definitely see that there's a demographic of people that would really like this type of game. So.
Sure. Yeah. I think for me, I enjoyed the cooperative experience maybe a bit more than the competitive experience. And I don't know if that's going to be something that I consistently hold to, but I felt like it was a funner experience, more fun. To work with Sam on trying to figure out how we can both get our books of sun so that the bad guy doesn't have more books than one of us, because the way that works is that if the bad guy has more books of sun than either one of us, then they get an extra book, and then they multiply their books based off the number of players. So it's really, really, really important that both of you have more than him.
And mine didn't.
And I didn't. I failed at that. So, but that was a fun experience trying to figure out how can we both make sure we're carrying our load in this game. So I really enjoyed the cooperative experience, maybe more so than the competitive experience. So, and I feel like the focus is more on the competitive than it was the cooperative.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just a small thing. All right, scale of 1 to 10, love to hate. Where does Fabled the Spirit Lands come in at for you?
I'd probably give it a 6.5.
6.5?
Yeah.
Okay. Any reason for that?
It's just not, just not my type of game. I mean, it was easy enough to play, and I was able to figure out a way for me to get the end goal. But I just think that I don't know if I would have it out on the table again. Maybe,
I think, like she's been saying, it's just maybe not the directed target audience for you, this type of game. And I would maybe lean that way too, that I'm maybe not the direct target audience, but I do enjoy the different gameplay elements with this particular game. As I've already said, I really found the cooperative to be quite enjoyable. I'm going to give the game a 7.2. Somewhere in that ballpark, a little over 7. For me, I think the reason for that is because I think the gameplay is smooth. You could probably play with just about anybody. The iconography and the little card, like the cards aren't little, but what you need to look at on the cards seem to be little. That kind of puts a little damper on the game, a little strenuous on the game. But outside of that, I thought the game was all right. 7.2 is where I'm going to come in at on it. So there you have it. That's our thoughts on Fabled the Spirit Lands. It is from Crowd Games. Leave us some comments down below. Let us know what you think about this game.
Make sure to like and subscribe and push that bell button so you get notifications of all our new content.
I'm Lance.
I'm Sam.
And we are Love to Hate, where we try to bridge the gap between gamers and non-gamers. We'll catch you next time.